Here we are, my friends, a very special edition of INFOWARS Nightly News. It is Wednesday, January 4th, 2012, and I interviewed Bev Harris, the head of blackboxvoting.org, the recognized expert on election fraud across the United States and really worldwide. And she said clearly there's evidence, telltale signs, earmarks of fraud in Iowa. But we've got her joining us tomorrow, and we'll learn more then as the dust settles. But we're going to break down some of that here in a moment. And the incredible media attacks against Ron Paul by Al Gore, the Democratic governors, the entire political system is going after him. That's a pure certification that he's the real deal right there. The question is, do the American people still buy in to dinosaur media propaganda sold by the architects of the tyranny that we live under today? We also have a satire piece coming up. A Cobra commander who loves torture, TSA sticking their hands down your pants. He's going to be joining us because he's got a special announcement tonight he's going to make here on air. He's running for president. He thinks the American people will actually elect him. He loves torture. He loves terrorism. He loves corruption, and he works with Al-Qaeda. Cobra commander coming up tonight. I'm going to interview him. You don't want to miss this. Talk about being on both sides of the fence here. It's coming up. Okay, getting into the media attacks, Ron Paul was pretty much in a statistical dead heat. There was only a few hundred votes difference between the so-called frontrunner, Mr. Open Borders, Mr. Abortion, Mr. Obamacare, Mr. Gun Control, Mr. Carbon Tax, Mitt Romney, and then Santorum, who's come from nowhere, and then Congressman Ron Paul. And the exit polls and other data were showing Ron Paul winning handily. The majority of polls showed that, but suddenly it was basically a dead heat with all of them within 1 point or so of each other. The problem is that I talked to a lot of the people that were at caucuses today on the radio, and this has now come out in some of the mainline press reports in Iowa. It was amazing. You'd have the lights go off when they had all put down their ballots and handed them in when one guy had the sack, like out of an old whodunit movie where the lights go off and they turn back on in a minute and somebody's dead or the Maltese Falcon has been stolen. That was happening. Normally they do just raise their hands and it's publicly tallied. In a lot of precincts they didn't do that. They said you've got to put them on ballots, and then now, there were trucks that came up missing with 4 or 5 precincts, and we've got all of this broken down. But here's a headline out of the Tribune. One long caucus, one delayed official add up to late results for Story County, one of the key counties that had a whole bunch of precincts involved. But you know what? It doesn't matter. Fox News contributor and the architect of the Bush crime syndicate, Karl Rove, came out and said they had a gentleman's agreement on who really won that county, so you can trust them. And this stuff happened all across Iowa. And of course, Ron Paul doesn't want to challenge it because then they say, oh, he's being a sorry sport. But clearly, where there's smoke, there's fire, and something is rotten in the state of Denmark. Here is that clip, along with a great graphic we put together of Ron Paul in the lead until Karl Rove comes along with his magic. The same stuff we saw in Florida in 2000 and in Ohio that's now been certified as fraud and as a stolen election. Here's that clip.
Romney is going to win the Iowa caucuses by 14 votes. How solid is your evidence?
From a pretty good, reliable source. They made the correction in Story County, which moved it from an 18-point margin for Santorum to a 4-vote margin for Santorum. Clinton County, right. You have the one outstanding precinct in the state, and that it will show an 18-vote victory in that precinct for Mitt Romney, which will give him a statewide victory of 14 votes over.
From out of nowhere, it's Rick Santorum.
So I don't understand. You're saying that they basically have come to an agreement as to what the vote's going to be in Clinton?
The person who's got the official piece of paper is missing. But the Romney and Santorum people who are monitoring it agree on what the number is. They apparently have rounded up the representatives of the camps who have agreed, yes, we were there, we know exactly what the vote total was, and we both agreed to what it was.
Kind of like it was Karl Rove in 2000 that announced that Bush had won Florida when he hadn't. And I'm no fan of Al Gore, you know that, but they stole that. They stole that. And they've done it again. And again, this is only the tip of the iceberg. It is so frustrating. Here's the Examiner out of Washington. Karl Rove, Romney has won Iowa by 14 votes. And this was hours before all this was confirmed. And you've got all these precincts missing, and then magically, again, how they do it is they flip the lights off, or the votes are disappeared, and then more are added, and some are taken out, or both. And if people have done this before and been caught doing it, why do you expect it not to happen now? Almost all the scientific polls had Paul winning by huge margins. But then magically he comes in third. Now, granted, it's a statistical dead heat, you know, with a point or so between the three of them, but it happened. And again, it's these key big counties where it happened that pushed him over the edge. Again, we're just showing you county by county numbers right there. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. I mean, fool me 100 times. I'm brain dead if I continue to buy this known fraud from known scammers. We'll continue to break this down, but talking to Bev Harris today, who's coming on the show later in the week, the TV show, New Hampshire is where the real fraud goes on, and where they've got those special voting machines. The main company that runs it's run by a convicted felon. So that's the type for fraud, by the way. So that's the type of stuff we're dealing with here. Here's another Kurt Nimmo article. DNC-linked organization attacks Ron Paul. They've got the big rhino groups coming after him, but also the Democratic Governors Association is coming out saying he's dangerous and trying to scare seniors. Hey, what's scary is the mega banks that have already stolen people's public pensions in Europe and who've said they're going to do it here by freezing COLAs the last 3 years, your cost of living expense. It is your money. You did pay into it. And on top of it, devaluing the dollar. They're already stealing your Social Security. Let me ask you a question. For folks out there that are helping grandma out or helping your parents out or older folks that are watching, you already know your check isn't buying what it did a couple years ago. They cook the inflation numbers. They cook the unemployment numbers. I mean, give me a break. So you got that. And then I don't have time to get into it. We had some clips. We'll play them tomorrow night. Al Gore on his current TV, the guy that wants you to pay him to breathe, he's come out and said Ron Paul's silly and all this other stuff, and had the young turd guy, the young turds, you know, whose wife's a CPS person, sit there and make jokes about it. I mean, you've got a discredited pig, a man-bear pig, an imaginary creature, a fraudster, who, when he's not, you know, supposedly groping masseuses, tells us we should pay him money to breathe. I mean, sometime this fraud's got to end. Now, speaking of fraud, CNN reportedly finally aired this today, many hours after it was supposedly live yesterday, but we talked to reporters on the ground who've given us good intel in the past that it was a few minutes delayed with Wolf Blitzer. And they had all these other camera people there in the same building, and that this feed was not dead. And then coming up, we've got an interview with one of our reporters got with him, with the actual soldier who expanded on what CNN was so afraid of that they censored it. But here's that quick clip of CNN pulling the plug on the live feed. And one of my producers pointed out today, if you watch the feed after this, you see a line of reporters joking about pulling the feed. In the background, you can see them making jokes about the feed being cut right after it happens. Here it is.
That's right, and we have here somebody who actually did just go vote for Ron Paul, a first-time caucus voter, Corporal Jesse Thorson, who is 28 years old, and you are active-duty U.S. Army. Why did you vote for Ron Paul?
Well, I'm really excited about a lot of his ideas, especially when it comes to bringing the soldiers home. I've been serving for 10 years now, and all 10 years of those have been during wartime. I'd like to see a little peacetime Army, and I think he has the right idea.
Now, you have done 2 tours in Afghanistan. You told me you're going to go back for a third tour. I mean, if you can see your neck right there, what you have on your tattoo, 9/11, remember, and a picture of the Twin Towers. You know, some Republicans out there have been saying that Ron Paul would be very dangerous for this country because he wants to bring troops like you back from your post from all over the world.
Well, I think it would be even more dangerous to start nitpicking wars with other countries. Someone like Iran, Israel is more than capable of.
All right, we just lost our connection, unfortunately.
I have another speaker.
That's not how a connection cutting out looks. And we had reporters there, multiple reporters that confirmed they had TVs running right there of what was on television versus what was taping. They were a couple minutes behind. So this was taped to air. They were running a giant delay. We see this on C-SPAN when government drug dealing comes up, and then this happens. So one of our great correspondents out there in Chicago who had actually traveled to Iowa to cover this, he broke it down and sent us the audio that he recorded right after this happened today. And then we've got, later after it happened, Ron Paul calling him up on stage. So their attempt at censorship backfired. Here's the actual interview with the veteran.
All right, just first off, your name and where you're from.
Okay, my name's Corporal Jesse Thorson, and I live in West Des Moines, Iowa.
What is it about Ron Paul that made you come out here for caucus night tonight?
Well, first and foremost, I've been in the Army for 10 years, and all 10 years of those we've been at war. And he's one of the candidates that want to bring us all home from that war and stop policing the world, and I'm really excited about that. He's just got a lot of good ideas, and I think that he's got the change that can really shake up our country.
Congressman Ball has been talking about bringing not just our troops home from Iraq, Afghanistan, but he's talking about bringing all the troops home from all the foreign bases, all the foreign countries. What are your thoughts on that, and how big of an impact could that be to bring all of our troops home from all these countries?
Well, I think in a way we need to